For decades, one moment stood untouched in human history: the last time we set foot on the moon. Back in 1972, during Apollo 17, astronauts walked across the lunar surface, and then nothing. Silence. No return, no follow-up, just a long pause that stretched across generations. That's why Artemis 3 was supposed to be different. It wasn't just another mission. It was meant to be the moment everything restarted. NASA planned to send astronauts back to the moon's south pole, a region never explored by humans, where frozen water could unlock the future of space exploration. 2 astronauts would descend to the surface, spending nearly a week conducting experiments, exploring new terrain, and proving that humanity could finally go back and stay. It was positioned as the beginning of a new era, one that would lead to permanent lunar bases and even missions to Mars. But as ambitious as that vision was, there was a problem building behind the scenes that few people fully understood. At first, the delays didn't seem like a big deal. A shift from 2024 to 2025 sounded normal for something as complex as returning humans to the moon. But then it slipped, again and again. What was once a clear timeline started turning into a moving target. By 2023, internal discussions were already hinting that the mission might not happen until 2026. And not long after, even that estimate began to look optimistic. One of the earliest warning signs came from reports about the next generation spacesuits. These weren't just upgrades. They were completely new systems designed for the harsh environment of the moon's south pole. But development wasn't going as planned, and timelines quietly stretched further out than expected. At the same time, concerns began to surface around the Orion spacecraft itself, specifically its heat shield, one of the most critical components for safely bringing astronauts back to Earth, was raising questions after earlier testing. Engineers needed more time to fully understand how it would perform under the extreme conditions of re-entry, and that uncertainty alone was enough to slow everything down. And the deeper NASA looked into the mission, the more small issues started stacking up. None of them seemed catastrophic on their own, but together, they created a growing sense that the schedule was slipping out of reach. Then came the official confirmations. What had been speculation turned into reality, as launch dates were pushed further, eventually landing somewhere around 2027 or later. Each delay wasn't just about fixing a problem. It was about buying time. Time to refine systems, time to test hardware, and time to avoid a failure that could set the entire program back even further. Because unlike the Apollo era, this wasn't just about getting there first. It was about getting it right. But even as NASA worked to solve these issues, it became clear that the biggest obstacle wasn't something they could fully control. And what came next would force a decision that changed the mission entirely. The biggest challenge wasn't coming from inside NASA. It was coming from the systems they were depending on. For Artemis 3 to land on the moon, everything hinged on a completely new piece of technology, the human landing system. And unlike the Apollo era, NASA wasn't building it alone. Companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin were tasked with developing the vehicles that would actually take astronauts from orbit down to the lunar surface. On paper, it sounded like the future of spaceflight: faster innovation, lower costs, and cutting-edge designs. But in reality, it introduced a level of uncertainty that the mission couldn't ignore. SpaceX's Starship HLS was unlike anything ever built, a massive, fully reusable spacecraft designed to land on the moon. But it was still deep in development, with multiple test flights revealing just how difficult it is to perfect a system of that scale. At the same time, Blue Origin was working on its own lunar lander, often referred to as Blue Moon, which also hadn't completed the rigorous testing required for human missions. Both vehicles needed to pass NASA's strict human rating certification, a process that takes years and leaves little room for error. And here's the problem. Without a fully operational lander, Artemis 3 couldn't land. It didn't matter if the rocket was ready or if the astronauts were trained. There was simply no way to get them to the surface safely. Reports and industry chatter began suggesting that progress wasn't moving fast enough to meet the timeline. Some speculated that NASA was now relying on technologies that weren't ready for prime time, creating a bottleneck that no amount of internal fixes could solve. This wasn't just a delay anymore. It was a fundamental risk to the entire mission. And as that reality became impossible to ignore, NASA was faced with a choice: wait even longer, or completely rethink what Artemis 3 was supposed to be. Then, in early 2026, everything changed. After years of delays, quiet concerns, and growing pressure, NASA made a move that caught a lot of people off guard. Artemis 3, the mission that was supposed to put humans back on the moon, was officially redefined. Instead of heading for a historic landing, the mission would stay much closer to home, operating in Earth orbit as a large-scale test flight. The announcement didn't come with dramatic headlines, but the implications were massive. After decades of waiting, the long-promised return to the lunar surface was suddenly pushed further into the future. The updated plan, confirmed by NASA leadership, shifted the focus entirely. Rather than attempting a high-risk landing with systems that weren't fully ready, Artemis 3 would now test critical technologies in orbit, specifically the ability to rendezvous and dock with the new lunar landers being developed by SpaceX and Blue Origin. It was a major pivot, turning what was once the headline moment of the Artemis program into something closer to a dress rehearsal. At the same time, Artemis 4 was tentatively positioned as the mission that could finally attempt the landing, targeting sometime around 2028. To some, this looked like a strategic decision, buying time to reduce risk and avoid a potential failure on a global stage. But others saw it differently. There's been growing discussion suggesting that the shift may have been less about strategy and more about necessity, with key systems simply not ready in time. Either way, the message was clear. Artemis 3 was no longer the mission people thought it would be. And with that change locked in, a new question started to emerge. If this mission isn't going to the moon anymore, what exactly is it going to do instead?
So if Artemis 3 isn't heading to the moon anymore, what is it actually going to do? The answer is far more technical and far more important than it might seem at first. Instead of a landing, the mission is now designed to act as a full-scale test of everything that would have been used on the lunar surface. Astronauts will launch aboard NASA's Orion spacecraft and enter Earth orbit, where they'll attempt something that has never been done before, docking with one, or possibly even two, separately launched lunar landers developed by SpaceX and Blue Origin. This isn't just a routine maneuver. It's a high-stakes demonstration of whether these systems can actually work together in real conditions. Once in orbit, the crew will begin testing critical systems that would normally be used much farther from Earth. That includes propulsion, life support, communication links, and onboard operations inside the landers themselves. They'll also evaluate the next-generation spacesuits designed specifically for moon missions to see how they perform during real use. Every movement, every connection, every system check is meant to answer one question: are we actually ready to attempt a landing? Because if even one of these elements fails in orbit, it would be far riskier to discover that problem near the moon. There's also ongoing discussion about how far from Earth this mission will go. Some planners are considering a lower orbit, which would be more efficient and conserve resources. Others are pushing for a higher orbit that better simulates the harsh conditions of deep space, including temperature extremes and communication delays. As of now, that decision hasn't been finalized, adding another layer of uncertainty to an already evolving mission. In many ways, Artemis 3 has transformed into something like a dress rehearsal on a global stage, a mission where everything is tested, but nothing is left to chance. It may not deliver the historic landing people were expecting, but it could determine whether that landing happens at all. And the deeper you look into it, the more it starts to feel like this mission isn't just about preparation. It's about proving that the entire plan still works.
But as the mission shifted into a massive test in Earth orbit, a deeper layer of concern started to surface, one that goes beyond just timelines and hardware.
There's been growing buzz around the idea that Artemis 3's redesign wasn't purely strategic, but a response to mounting pressure behind the scenes. For one, the cost of the program has become impossible to ignore. The Space Launch System, the rocket powering the mission, has been estimated at around $4 billion per launch, making it one of the most expensive spaceflight systems ever built. That alone has sparked debates about sustainability, especially as private companies like SpaceX push forward with reusable systems designed to dramatically cut costs. Some reports claim that NASA is now walking a fine line, balancing legacy systems with newer, unproven technologies that haven't fully matured yet. At the same time, there's been quiet speculation about whether key components are truly ready for the kind of mission originally planned. The human landing systems, both from SpaceX and Blue Origin, are still undergoing development, and while progress is being made, neither has completed the full certification process required to carry astronauts. That's not unusual for cutting-edge technology, but it does raise questions about how realistic the earlier timelines ever were. Some industry observers have suggested that NASA may have initially set aggressive goals to maintain momentum and public interest, only to later scale things back as the technical challenges became clearer. There's also been discussion around risk, specifically the risk of failure on a mission that carries enormous global attention.
Unlike past test flights, Artemis 3 was originally meant to be a defining moment, watched by millions around the world. And if something had gone wrong during a lunar landing attempt, it wouldn't just delay the program, it could damage confidence in the entire Artemis initiative. Because of that, some believe the shift to an Earth orbit test may be a way to reduce that risk, allowing NASA to validate every system step by step before committing to the surface. Of course, NASA hasn't framed it this way publicly, but the timing of the decision has led to a lot of speculation online. On top of that, political and budget pressures continue to play a role in the background. Funding proposals, debates over long-term priorities, and shifting government support have all influenced how quickly the program can move. It's been said that space exploration is never just about science. It's also about economics and policy, and Artemis is no exception. With so many moving parts, both technical and political, the mission has become more than just a return to the moon. It's a test of whether this entire approach to space exploration can actually succeed. And when you step back and look at all of it, the delays, the redesign, the uncertainty, it starts to raise a bigger question that no one seems to be answering directly. Are we closer to the moon than we were before, or has the path become even more complicated than anyone expected?
Now, all of this leads to a much bigger shift in the timeline than most people realize. With Artemis 3 no longer attempting a landing, that responsibility has effectively been pushed to Artemis 4, now expected to be the mission that finally puts humans back on the moon, sometime around 2028. But even that date isn't set in stone. If the systems being tested during Artemis 3 don't perform exactly as expected, there's a real possibility that the timeline could slip again. And at this point, that wouldn't surprise many observers. The program has already been delayed multiple times, and each delay tends to reveal just how complex and fragile the entire plan really is. What makes this even more interesting is how much NASA is now relying on private companies to make it all work. Unlike the Apollo era, where everything was developed under one centralized system, the Artemis program depends heavily on partners like SpaceX and Blue Origin to deliver critical hardware. That includes the landers, key technologies, and potentially even future infrastructure around the moon. On one hand, this approach could accelerate innovation and reduce long-term costs. But on the other, it introduces new variables, different timelines, different priorities, and systems that all have to integrate perfectly for the mission to succeed. If even one piece falls behind, everything else can get pushed with it. There's also the growing question of sustainability. Getting back to the moon is one thing, but staying there is something entirely different. Artemis isn't just about a single landing. It's meant to establish a long-term human presence, with future missions building on each other. That means the stakes are higher than ever. A delay doesn't just affect one launch, it impacts the entire roadmap, from lunar bases to future missions to Mars. And as timelines stretch further out, some have started to wonder whether the goalposts are quietly shifting again. At the same time, the expectations haven't gone away. The world is still watching, and the pressure to deliver is only increasing. Every update, every delay, every test flight becomes part of a much larger story, one that's been building for years. And while Artemis 3 may no longer be the mission that returns humans to the lunar surface, it could end up being just as important. Because if it proves that these systems actually work together, it sets the stage for everything that comes next. But if it doesn't, then the timeline could stretch even further into the future, leaving one lingering question that's becoming harder to ignore. After all this time, are we truly on the verge of returning to the moon, or are we still trying to figure out how to get there?
In the end, Artemis 3 has quietly transformed from the mission that was supposed to make history into the mission that determines if history can even happen. What was once planned as humanity's long-awaited return to the moon is now a high-stakes test, unfolding much closer to Earth than anyone expected. And while that might sound like a step back, it reveals something far more important: the reality of how difficult it is to go back. This isn't the 1960s anymore. The technology is more advanced, the goals are bigger, and the expectations are higher. Every system has to work flawlessly, every partnership has to align, and every risk has to be carefully managed. But there's also a deeper question lingering beneath it all. After decades of progress, innovation, and billions of dollars invested, the path back to the moon is still filled with uncertainty. Delays, redesigns, and shifting plans have shown that even with today's technology, nothing about this is guaranteed.
Artemis 3 may not deliver the moment people were waiting for, but it could decide whether that moment happens at all. Because the moon hasn't moved, it's still there, waiting. The real question is, are we finally ready to reach it again? Or are we closer than ever to realizing just how far away it still is?